Taoiseach, the reason why this has been raised so often is because of the damage that it's doing to the country. So Ireland has had the longest and most severe lockdown of any country in Europe. According to Reuters a couple of weeks ago, Ireland had 163 days of workplace closures, and that compared to Germany, which had 34 days of workplace closures. Now, the reason for the length and severity of the lockdown in this country is because the government hasn't got the other tools against this virus right. And prime among that is the issue of the vaccine. So there is a massive cost to society from this. There is 830,000 people currently on hospital waiting lists. We've heard of oncologists telling us that there's going to be an influx of far more advanced cancers into the system because the health service is not able to deal with people who have non-COVID illnesses. Now, from my perspective, Stephen Donnelly has been involved in horizon politics. Every single time he sets an objective and a date, by the time you get to that objective on the date, it actually slides back into the horizon again, and you never get to objective. So Stephen Donnelly said we would have all of the nursing homes vaccinated by the end of January. They were still vaccinating nursing homes at the end of February. On the 14th of February, he said in 3 weeks, all those over the age of 85 will be vaccinated. In my county, we know of GP surgeries that don't have a date yet for the first tranche of vaccines for those over the age of 85. Now, other countries have been proactive. We've seen Austria and Denmark get involved in a partnership with Israel to seek and find vaccines. We've seen other countries in the European Union seek to additionally chase down supply. Now, just a final point. I asked Stephen Donnelly last week in a parliamentary question what actions he had taken to procure additional vaccines outside of the European supply chain. He said none.
All right, thank you. Taoiseach.
There's a broad range of questions there. Can I say at the outset, it would be interesting, Deputy Tóibín, if you followed up that story in Israel. How many vaccines are those countries going to get in the next month from Israel? Or the month after that? Or the month after that? You see, people can, that's the point. There's going to be no immediate dividend from that particular venture anytime soon in terms of additional vaccines. Why? Because Israel is vaccinating its own country and will continue to do so. And the reality is, as I've said here repeatedly today, the key to this is increased production and manufacturing capacity. That is the key to it. And I would say that in terms of, we have first of all, we've taken on all our full offerings from the European Union and the pre-purchase agreements in respect of the companies that have so far been authorised in terms of Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna and AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca has not fulfilled its contractual commitments to the European Union, has fallen very, very significantly short of its contractual commitments to Europe. That has caused considerable annoyance within the European Union and resulted, as we know, in the decision by the Commission in respect of the protocol and so on. So angry was the Commission at the time at the degree to which AstraZeneca had not fulfilled its contractual obligations. And the next company will be Johnson & Johnson, but they've been clear that it will be April before they will be issuing supplies to the European Union, even though they will be authorised soon now by the European Medicines Agency. We have approached Pfizer's. I approached Pfizer's here in Ireland, made it clear to the Pfizer Corporation that Ireland would be willing to make its manufacturing, to support in any way any reconfiguration of any plant in Ireland to generate additional vaccine production. Now, most of our pharma in Ireland are involved in the production of very valuable medicines and indeed of vaccines for use elsewhere in respect of different diseases and globally. And so we have made that offer, but as I said earlier, Pfizer have come back and said that they're concentrating on the Belgian plant, and they reconfigure that, and they've increased the capacity of the Belgian plant, and also in terms of Germany, in terms of Marburg, in terms of its work with BioNTech, which has also substantially increased production and supply lines, and will continue to do so. And in terms of the J&J, for example, President Biden brought Merck and J&J together. We again immediately spoke with our IDA people and said, okay, can we get that deal in Ireland? Can J&J in Ireland and Merck in Ireland coalesce in respects of their plants in Ireland to increase manufacturing capacity. And again, the answer was no, that wouldn't be happening here because of what's going on in Carlow, for example, in the Merck plant in Carlow, and the commitments they have there, and in terms of other plants. So anything we can do to support the companies in terms of increasing production and capacity and utilising Irish manufacturing capacity towards that end, we will do. If that means state aid support, we're open to doing that, and we've made that clear to all of the companies, and we'll continue to do that. I would say in terms of intellectual properties, I don't believe we should get into an ideological position on this. I mean, be mindful of how the questions need to be asked as to why AstraZeneca has found itself in difficulty in terms of fulfilling its contracts. And my view is, arrangements have been agreed. It's not a deferral. We're not deferring to Big Pharma or anything like that. I think one of the great achievements that's been missed in all of the debate and the narrative is that within 10 months, because of the pre-purchase agreements and the funding up front that enabled the development of the vaccines, we had an extraordinary situation where we actually have 3 vaccines authorised in 10 months. That would never have happened before in terms of the history of the development of vaccines. That's a plus. So the model that was used may not meet the Deputy Boyd Barrett's ideological approach, but it actually has worked in terms of the production and development of vaccines that have been very, very effective in terms of reducing severe illness, in terms of reducing mortality, and increasingly now showing evidence in terms of reducing infection rates. There is an issue, which I would grant, between the performance of AZ in respect of the UK market and the European contract. That is a fair point, and that needs to be further examined in terms of the delivery to the UK market from AZ. And it appears very much in sharp contrast, is in sharp contrast to the presentation, or sorry, to the fulfilment of its contract with the European Union. There's a further, after Johnson & Johnson, we're hoping that CureVac will come on stream. We haven't factored that into any figures towards the end of Q2, which would be another important additional vaccine. On the proposals to travel, the European Commission has issued a communication around what they're calling a green pass. We're not yet at the stage, because public health is cautious in terms of the longer-term efficacy of the passports, and in terms of the utilisation of the passports. There's also civil liberty issues in terms of rights of citizens, in respect of making it an imperative, for example, to have a passport to do various things in society and so on, and travel. Sorry, in terms of Russia, Sputnik had been invited, and had been invited for a long time out, to apply for EMA authorization. My understanding is now that they are. By the way, they're a long way from vaccinating their own population as well. They will have huge challenges there. But if that is approved by the EMA, we have no difficulty in using vaccines that are approved by the EMA. And likewise with the vaccine from China. Likewise, if that's approved by the EMA, we have to have some authorization mechanism for vaccines. I would hope that most people would accept that.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
I think we do have to do that. And just to say that the vaccines were approved late last December. The bulk of our restrictions were prior to the vaccines arriving on the scene. But I would say to Deputy Tóibín, compare Europe on mortality and on incident rates with Ireland, the average European mortality. Compare the UK and performance on mortality and incident with Ireland's. There was a dividend too out of the restrictions we put in place. They've been very, very difficult for people. But I think all of us will agree that we have to put public health first. We have to put the health service first in terms of making sure it doesn't become overwhelmed with what happened last January. And